Look, I'm just gonna say it up front. When humanity finally got that long-awaited first contact signal from an alien species, we all expected something dramatic. You know, floating cities, telepathic megabrains, or at the very least, something that looked vaguely intimidating. What we got instead was a distress call from what appeared to be a species of panic-prone hamsters. And somehow, I was the idiot who answered it. Name's Jake Reynolds. I haul cargo between Earth's orbital stations and the outer colonies. Not glamorous work, but it pays the bills and keeps me away from corporate meetings, which is basically heaven. On the day everything changed, I was 3 beers into my off shift, floating around the cockpit of my ship in my boxers, when my comm array started screaming. Now, I should clarify. I was definitely, absolutely, 100% not supposed to answer official first contact transmissions. That's for the diplomats with their fancy suits and rehearsed speeches. But the transmission was looping, getting more desperate with each repeat. And honestly, I was bored. I punched the accept button. What appeared on my screen looked like someone had crossed a hamster with a mushroom and given it anxiety disorder. Big wet eyes, fluffy cream-colored fur, tiny paws clutching what I assumed was their version of a microphone. It was trembling. "Please," it squeaked. "Please, we need help. They're coming. 3 days. Maybe less. We don't know what to do." Everyone said no. "Please." I blinked, rubbed my eyes, checked if those beers were stronger than advertised. Slow down there, buddy. Who's coming?" "The Chromath Empire," the little guy wailed. "They're going to glass our planet, turn it into a parking lot. We asked the Valorians for help and they laughed. The Centauri Union said we weren't worth the military expense. The Galactic Council said to file a formal complaint, which takes 6 months to process. We're out of options." I stared at this panicking space hamster and felt something shift in my chest. Maybe it was the beers. Maybe it was because I'd spent the last 3 years hauling literal garbage and was desperate for something interesting. Or maybe, just maybe, I'm not completely dead inside. "Okay," I said. "Let me get this straight. You've got a hostile empire about to blow up your planet. You've asked everyone in the galaxy for help, and they all said no?" "Yes," the creature sniffled. "You're our last hope. We detected your species just emerged as spacefaring. The council said you're not developed enough to bother, but we're desperate." "Not developed enough." Classic. The hamster's eyes went even wider, which I didn't think was physically possible. "You'll help? Just like that? Don't you need to consult your leaders? Your military? Buddy, I am Earth's military right now, apparently. Send me those coordinates." 3 seconds later, my navigation computer was plotting a course to a system I'd never heard of. I looked at my cargo hold, currently empty except for some spare parts, and approximately 6,000 tons of mining equipment that was definitely, legally speaking, not weaponizable. "What's your name, little guy?" "Ambassador Pip, of the Squeeb Collective." Squeeb. Of course they were called Squeebs. "All right, Ambassador Pip. I'm Jake. I'll be there in 18 hours. Try not to panic too much." "Too much?" Pip's voice cracked. "The Chromath Empire has destroyed 47 civilizations. They have weapons that can crack planets. Their warriors stand 3 meters tall and breathe fire." I pulled up my star charts, cross-referencing what I could find about this Chromath Empire. The files were thin, mostly trade warnings and incident reports. Bullies, from the look of it. The kind who picked on anyone smaller and ran away from fair fights. "Pip, buddy, I need you to trust me here. Your problem just became my problem. And I'm really good at solving problems. But you're just one ship, one human." I grinned at the screen. "Yeah, that's what I'm counting on." After Pip signed off, still trembling, I sat there in my boxers, staring at the star field outside my viewport. Somewhere out there, a species of hamster people were about to get curb-stomped by some intergalactic bullies, and every so-called civilized species in the galaxy had turned them down. Well, Earth didn't get where we are by being reasonable. I cracked open another beer, fired up the engines, and plotted my jump. The rusty nickel might look like a flying trash can held together with duct tape and prayer, but she had one thing going for her. She was human-made, and we build things that last. Or explode really impressively. Either way, it'd be entertaining. "Okay, space hamsters," I muttered, watching the jump drive spin up. "Let's go poke an empire." 18 hours later, I dropped out of FTL into the Squeeb system and immediately understood why nobody took these guys seriously. Their planet looked like someone had designed it on a greeting card. Pastel pink continents, purple oceans, 3 tiny moons that sparkled like they were made of glitter. Even their orbital defense platforms looked non-threatening, like someone had built space stations out of gingerbread houses. The rusty nickel, you are cleared for landing at the primary spaceport. A high-pitched voice crackled over my comm. Please follow the designated flight path and, please don't crash into anything. We just repaired the landing pad from the last incident. Copy that. Control. Coming in nice and easy. The spaceport turned out to be adorable. Miniature everything. The landing pad was sized for ships maybe a quarter of the nickel's mass. I had to set down in what was clearly their cargo freight area. And even then, my ship took up about 6 parking spots. When I popped the hatch and climbed down, I found myself surrounded by approximately 200 squeebs, all staring up at me, like I was a skyscraper. Because, comparatively, I was. These guys topped out at maybe 8 inches tall, fluffy, round, with those huge eyes and tiny paws. They were wearing what I assumed were official government outfits, little vests and badges, but it just made them look like someone's Build-A-Bear collection had gained sentience and started a bureaucracy. Ambassador Pip? I called out, trying not to step on anyone. Here! One of them bounced forward, moving like a nervous volleyball. Oh, thank goodness you're real. I had 3 different nightmares that you were a hallucination brought on by stress. Are you always this tall? Is this a standard human height? Should I be addressing your kneecaps? I carefully knelt down, which caused a ripple of gasps through the crowd. Now I was only 10 feet tall instead of 20, to their perspective. Jake Reynolds. At your service. You must be Pip. Yes, and this is General Fuzzworth, head of our planetary defense force. Pip gestured to another squeeb wearing what looked like a tiny helmet with a feather in it. General Fuzzworth puffed out his chest, which made him slightly more round than the others. Human Jake, we appreciate your response to our distress call. I want you to know that we're not cowards. We've fought bravely against the Chromath before. How'd that go? Terrible. Absolutely terrible. We lost immediately. But we fought bravely while losing. I had to respect the honesty. Show me what we're dealing with. They led me to their command center, which involved me shuffling along on my knees like I was playing the world's weirdest game of limbo. Squeebs scattered ahead of me, clearing a path and shouting warnings like, "Human coming through," and "Watch your tails." The command center was actually impressive, once I got past the scale issue. Holographic displays, real-time stellar cartography, communication arrays that would have made Earth's military jealous. These guys had tech, they just didn't have size or apparently any capacity for violence. The Chromath fleet will arrive in approximately 62 hours, Fuzzworth said, pulling up a display. 3 dreadnoughts, 12 destroyers, and 40 support craft. They've issued their standard ultimatum. Surrender all resources, except subjugation, or be destroyed. I studied the fleet composition. Something was tickling the back of my brain. What kind of weapons are we talking about? Pip pulled up another screen, listing specs that made both squeebs whimper. Plasma cannons, fusion missiles, electromagnetic pulse bombs. Their shields can withstand sustained fire from anything in our arsenal for approximately 3 seconds before we run out of ammunition. And they've used this same fleet to conquer how many systems? 47 confirmed, Fuzzworth said quietly. They're very good at this. I leaned in closer to the display, reading the technical specifications. Then I started laughing. Both squeebs looked horrified. I'm sorry, Pip squeaked. Is this a human fear response? Are you having a breakdown? Should we get you water? No, I'm fine. I wiped my eyes. It's just, okay, this is gonna sound crazy, but your unstoppable empire? They're running tech that's about equivalent to what Earth was using 40 years ago. Dead silence. That can't be right, Fuzzworth said. They've destroyed entire civilizations. Yeah, civilizations that are apparently way behind the curve on military development. I pulled out my tablet and started running calculations. Their plasma cannons are solid, don't get me wrong, but their targeting systems are ancient. Their shields use a frequency rotation that we figured out how to bypass in, like, 2089. And these dreadnoughts? Big, slow, no point defense worth mentioning. I looked up at 2 very confused hamster faces. Guys, I think your galaxy has been at peace for so long that you forgot how to actually fight a war. The Chromath aren't unstoppable. They're just the only ones still willing to throw a punch. Pip's paws were trembling. But you're still just one ship, one human, even with better technology. Pip, my friend, let me tell you about human cargo regulations. I grinned. Specifically, the loopholes. I spent the next 6 hours in the Squeeb Command Center, cross-referencing their data on the Chromath Empire with everything in Earth's databases. The Squeebs brought me what they called refreshments, which turned out to be thimble-sized cups of something that tasted like vanilla anxiety. I needed about 40 of them to equal one actual drink. So the Chromath have never actually faced significant resistance, I said, scrolling through battle reports. Every species they've hit either surrendered immediately or got steamrolled in the first engagement. Correct, Fuzzworth said, somehow looking even smaller as he reviewed his own planet's defense capabilities. Most civilizations in this sector follow Galactic Council protocols, which prohibit excessive military buildup. It's considered barbaric. Barbaric, I repeated slowly. You guys outlawed being good at war, and then you're surprised when the one species that ignored that rule keeps winning? Pip nodded miserably. The council said mutual disarmament would usher in an age of prosperity and peace. How's that working out for the 47 dead civilizations? Silence. The kind of silence that speaks volumes. I pulled up the Chromath fleet specifications again, really digging into the details this time. Their dreadnoughts were impressive looking. Sure. Big, intimidating wedge shapes, lots of weapons ports, the kind of ship that screams, "I'm here to ruin your day." But the more I looked at the actual numbers, the funnier it got. Their primary plasma cannons had a cycle time of 8 seconds between shots. 8 seconds. My cargo ship's point defense system could fire 60 rounds in that time. Their missiles were long-range but slow. No evasive programming, just straight-line dumb fire. And their shields, oh man, their shields were beautiful in their simplicity. Single-layer frequency barriers that rotated through 7 standard wavelengths. Earth had cracked that technology before I was born. What are you thinking? Pip asked nervously. You've been quiet for 3 minutes. Is that bad? That feels bad. I'm thinking, I said slowly, that this is either going to go really well or really badly. And either way, it'll be hilarious. I opened a connection to Earth Command. Took about 4 minutes for the signal to route through, and when it connected, I got Director Kim's face on screen. She looked like she'd been expecting my call, which probably wasn't a good sign. Reynolds, I heard you answered a first contact transmission while intoxicated. I was only 3 beers in. That's practically sober for a cargo hauler. And now you're involving yourself in an interstellar conflict with an empire we know nothing about. I prefer to think of it as aggressive networking. Kim rubbed her temples. Jake, I'm looking at the specs you sent. This Chromath Empire has 3 dreadnoughts and enough firepower to level a continent. You have a cargo ship. A cargo ship with fully licensed mining equipment, atmospheric processing lasers, and a state-of-the-art debris deflection system. Those are not weapons. No, ma'am, they absolutely are not weapons. That would violate about 6 different cargo regulations. These are completely civilian tools that I'm authorized to carry for totally legal mining operations. A long pause. Kim's expression didn't change, but I saw the corner of her mouth twitch. So to be clear, you're not planning to engage in military action. Absolutely not. I'm just going to help these nice folks with some aggressive mining in the immediate vicinity of hostile vessels. And if those vessels happen to be damaged by your mining equipment, well, that would be an unfortunate workplace accident. OSHA's going to have my ass. Kim leaned back in her chair. Jake, if you do this, Earth is officially disavowing any knowledge of your actions. You'll be acting as a private citizen, not a representative of Earth or its military. Understood. That said, she leaned forward, our mining lasers are rated for cutting through 15 meters of solid titanium. The Chromath hull plating is a nickel-iron composite, approximately 8 meters thick, hypothetically speaking. I grinned. Hypothetically, that's very useful information. Good luck, Reynolds. Try not to start an intergalactic incident. No promises. The connection cut. I turned back to find both Pip and Fuzzworth staring at me with expressions that somehow mixed hope and terror in equal measure. Okay, I said, cracking my knuckles. Here's what's gonna happen. The Chromath are going to show up, do their intimidation routine, demand your surrender. And then I'm gonna politely explain why that's not gonna work. How? Pip's voice was barely a squeak. I pulled up a tactical display of the system, marking orbital positions and approach vectors. The Chromath like to make a statement. They'll come in close to the planet, establish orbit, show off their fleet. Makes the surrender demand more dramatic. But it also means they'll be sitting in a nice, tight formation. And I'm going to introduce them to humanity's favorite pastime, finding out after they mess around. Fuzzworth studied the display. You really think you can stop them? Alone? I thought about Earth's history, about every underdog story, every time someone said it couldn't be done, about the fact that humans didn't get to the stars by being reasonable or following the rules. General, here's the thing about humans. We spent 10,000 years getting really, really good at violence. Then we spent another few hundred years turning that violence into science. And then, because we're idiots, we figured out how to hide weapons inside civilian equipment, so we could feel better about ourselves. I stood up, having to hunch over in the tiny command center. The Chromath are about to learn why Earth has a saying: talk softly and carry a big stick. Or in my case, carry mining equipment that's definitely not a stick. Pip bounced nervously. What do you need from us? Coffee. Lots of coffee. And maybe some of those vanilla anxiety drinks. I've got a battle plan to write and about 50 hours to prep. As I headed back to my ship, I heard Fuzzworth whisper to Pip. Is he insane? Probably. Pip whispered back. But he's our insane now. Yeah, I thought. That about summed it up. 58 hours later, the Chromath fleet dropped out of FTL like they were arriving at a parade. I was floating in the Nichols cockpit, sipping my 6th cup of squeeb coffee, which was actually incredible, like if espresso and happiness had a baby. The sensor board lit up with contact markers, 3 dreadnoughts front and center, destroyers in supporting, formation, support craft scattered around like remora fish following sharks, textbook intimidation formation, all spectacle, minimal tactical flexibility. Human Jake, Pip's voice crackled over the comm. They're hailing us. Do we respond? Nah, let them sweat for a minute. I'm still calibrating my mining lasers. Those aren't actually mining lasers anymore, are they? Pip, I'm offended. These are absolutely still mining lasers. I'm just mining their fleet composition for data. On my tactical display, the Chromath flagship was moving forward, separating slightly from the formation. Classic dominance behavior. The big bad commander wanted everyone to see him leading from the front. My comm board lit up with an incoming transmission on all frequencies. I let it connect. The face that appeared on screen was exactly what I expected. Reptilian features, scales the color of dried blood, too many teeth, and eyes that probably looked intimidating to species that hadn't invented horror movies. This was Commander Gorthax, according to the IFF signature. Pathetic squeebs. Gorthax's voice was all gravel and menace. Your time is up. Surrender your world and resources to the Chromath Empire, or watch your planet burn. You have 1 standard hour to... Yeah, I'm gonna stop you right there, Gorthax. The commander's eyes widened slightly. Who dares interrupt? Name's Jake Reynolds. I'm the human, currently parked in orbit, and I've got a counter-proposal for you. Gorthax's scaled face twisted into what might have been confusion. Human? The squeebs hired mercenaries? From a species we've never heard of? Hired is a strong word. They asked nicely, and I had some free time. Here's my counter-proposal. You turn that fleet around, go home, and we all pretend this never happened. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds before Gorthax started laughing. It sounded like rocks in a blender. 1 cargo vessel thinks to threaten the Chromath Empire? Your species must be even more foolish than the squeebs. Perhaps after we glass their planet, we'll visit yours next and teach you respect. See? That's where you're making a mistake, buddy. I'm not threatening you. I'm offering you a really generous exit ramp before this gets embarrassing. Embarrassing? Gorthax leaned forward. I have 3 dreadnoughts. You have a cargo hauler. What exactly do you think happens next? Well, in about 30 seconds, you're gonna find out why humanity has a saying about bringing knives to gunfights. Fair warning, we're the ones with the guns. Gorthax's expression went from amused to angry. Destroy that ship, the comm cut. My sensor board immediately lit up with targeting locks from at least 6 destroyers. Their plasma cannons started charging, which I could see on the energy reading displays. 8-second cycle time, just like the spec said. I had 7 seconds to work with. Okay, Nickel, I muttered, hands dancing across the control panels. Let's show these guys what Earth's mining industry looks like. My debris deflection system, which was absolutely not a military-grade shield generator, spun up to full power. The first salvo of plasma bolts hit like sledgehammers, and the Nickel didn't even shudder. Turns out when you design shields to handle asteroid impacts at 0.5 C, plasma cannons from the galactic equivalent of the 1,990 seconds barely register. Their weapons are ineffective. I heard someone shout on the Squeeb command channel. He's just sitting there. Yeah, about that. I locked onto the nearest destroyer and activated my forward mining array. Let me introduce you guys to industrial-grade cutting lasers. The mining lasers were designed to slice through solid rock and metal ore from 500 meters away. From 2,000 meters in space, with no atmospheric diffusion, they were basically lightsabers on steroids. The destroyer's shields flickered once, trying to adapt to the frequency. The lasers didn't care. They punched through the barrier like it was tissue paper and carved a line straight through the ship's reactor housing. The destroyer went from combat-ready to drifting wreck in about 4 seconds. What? Gorthax's voice was back on the open channel. That's impossible! That's one, I said calmly, retargeting. You've got 11 more destroyers. Want to keep going? Apparently they did. The entire fleet opened fire, plasma bolts and fusion missiles filling the space between us. My point defense system, which was definitely just for shooting down space debris and definitely not an anti-missile grid, started engaging automatically. Turns out fusion missiles are really easy to intercept when they fly in straight lines and take forever to reach their target. I started carving through destroyers like I was being paid by the hour. My atmospheric processing lasers, which were mounted on the port and starboard arrays, could track multiple targets simultaneously. The chromath shields kept trying to adapt, but they were working with 7 frequency options, and I had about 40 different wavelengths to cycle through. It wasn't a fight, it was target practice. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Gorthax was shouting now. Scatter formation. Too little, too late. I'd already tagged 6 more destroyers, each one leaking atmosphere and going dark. The support craft were trying to flank me, but they were even more lightly armored. My railguns, which were clearly just for launching mining charges and definitely not kinetic kill vehicles, turned 3 of them into expanding clouds of debris. The dreadnoughts finally started moving, trying to bring their main guns to bear. They were slow, though. So slow, like watching Continental drift with engines. Gorthax, last chance, I said, taking a sip of coffee. You've got maybe 8 operational ships left. I'm offering you an out. The Chromath Empire does not flee from. I put a mining laser through his flagship's communications array. The transmission cut to static. Okay, hard way it is. The next 4 minutes were honestly kind of therapeutic. Every bully I'd ever dealt with, every corporate middle manager who'd talked down to me, every bureaucrat who'd made my life difficult, I channeled all of that into very precisely dismantling the Chromath fleet. Not destroying, mind you. That would have been excessive. I targeted engines, weapons systems, shield generators, turned their dreadnoughts into very expensive floating scrap without actually killing anyone if they had half-decent life support. When it was over, the Chromath flagship was drifting, trailing plasma and debris, all weapons offline. The rest of the fleet looked like they'd gone through a salvage yard, and I'd finished my coffee. Squeeb command, I said calmly. You guys seeing this? Seeing it? Pip's voice was about 3 octaves higher than normal. You just destroyed an entire Empire fleet in 8 minutes. Disabled, I corrected. Destroying would have been rude. This was just aggressive de-escalation. On my screen, I watched the Chromath flagship limp away, followed by what was left of their fleet. They'd be months repairing that damage. Maybe longer. I opened a final transmission to Gorthax. Hey buddy, you still alive over there? A weak groan answered me. Cool. Tell your empire that the squeebs are under human protection now. And next time someone asks nicely for you to leave them alone, maybe consider taking the hint. Have a safe trip home. I cut the transmission and leaned back in my chair. Pip, Fuzzworth, you guys okay down there? We're. Fuzzworth seemed to have lost the ability to form sentences. We're saved, Pip whispered. You actually saved us. Yeah, well, I plotted a course back to the planet. You asked nicely. That counts for a lot. Turns out, completely humiliating a major empire's battle fleet gets noticed pretty quickly in this galaxy. I was 3 days into helping the squeebs repair their orbital platforms, mostly just teaching them how to reinforce structural points because apparently their engineering was designed for aesthetics over durability, when Pip bounced into my workspace looking more anxious than usual. Jake, we have a problem. Another empire want to blow you up? Worse. The Galactic Council wants to talk to you. I looked down at the tiny ambassador. The same Galactic Council that told you to file a formal complaint while you were getting invaded? That's the one. They've requested your presence at a hearing. Requested is probably the wrong word. Demanded. They demanded your presence. Great. Space bureaucrats. The hearing was held via quantum entanglement communication. which was actually pretty cool technology. The squeebs set up a hollow chamber in their parliament building, and suddenly I was standing in what looked like the galaxy's most pretentious courtroom. Floating benches arranged in a circle, representatives from about 40 different species, all looking at me like I just tracked mud on their carpet. The head counselor was a Valorian, one of those species that's all crystalline and glowy. Her name was Essence of Judicial Wisdom, which I immediately shortened to Essie in my head because life's too short for four-word names. Human Jake Reynolds? Essie's voice sounded like wind chimes having an anxiety attack. You stand before the Galactic Council to answer for your actions in the Squeeb system. I mean, I'm actually standing in a room on Squeeb Prime, but sure, let's go with that. A ripple of what might have been gasps went through the council. Apparently nobody sassed the space court. You engaged in military action against the Chromath Empire, resulting in the destruction of 15 vessels and significant damage to 3 capital ships. Disabled, I corrected, and it was 14 vessels plus cosmetic damage to the capitals. Let's keep the facts straight. You acted without council authorization, violated multiple interstellar conflict resolution protocols, and demonstrated military capabilities that were not registered with the Defense Registry. I shrugged. I helped some folks who asked nicely. Last I checked, that wasn't illegal. A bug-like representative, all compound eyes and clicking mandibles, leaned forward. You, a single human in a cargo vessel, defeated a fleet that has subjugated 47 worlds. How is this possible? Good equipment and better training. Also, the Chromath are really bad at tactics. Impossible, another representative said, this one looking like a floating jellyfish made of light. Our analysis suggests your vessel must be a warship disguised as civilian craft. Nope. She's a certified cargo hauler. Got all the paperwork right here. I pulled up my ship's registration on the holo display. The Rusty Nickel, licensed for mining operations, debris clearing, and standard freight. Everything I used is legally registered civilian equipment. Essie's glow flickered, which I was learning meant she was annoyed. Your mining lasers should not be capable of penetrating military-grade shielding. Maybe you guys should build better shields. Dead silence. I was really getting good at causing that. A reptilian counselor, different species from Gorthax but same general aesthetic, spoke up. The human raises a disturbing point. Our defensive technologies have remained largely unchanged for 3,000 years. We assumed this was adequate. Because everyone follows the Council's demilitarization protocols, Essie said firmly, which maintain peace and stability. For everyone except the 47 civilizations the Chromath destroyed, I pointed out. Your peace and stability seems to have some gaps. The Chromath are an aberration. An isolated case of bull. I cut her off. The Chromath are an aberration. 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 They're what happens when everyone agrees to play nice except one guy. And instead of dealing with them, you told the squeebs to file paperwork while their planet was about to get glassed. Pip, who'd been standing quietly beside me, suddenly spoke up. His voice was shaking but determined. The human is correct. We followed every protocol, filed every form, requested aid through proper channels. We were told our situation was not economically viable for intervention. The Council cannot respond to every minor territorial dispute, Essie said, but her glow was dimmer now. Minor? Fuzzworth appeared beside Pip, tiny helmet askew. They were going to exterminate my entire species. The chamber erupted in overlapping voices, representatives arguing in a dozen different languages. I caught phrases like unprecedented military capability and destabilizing influence, and my personal favorite, dangerous precedent. A counselor who looked like a talking tree trunk called for order. The issue remains. What do we do about humanity? Their military technology clearly exceeds Council standards. We've been spacefaring for less than a century, I said. You guys have had FTL for thousands of years. Maybe the problem isn't that we're too advanced. Maybe you've just been coasting. Coasting? Essie's voice went sharp. Yeah, coasting. You've got this whole mutual disarmament thing going. Everyone agrees to keep their military tech at minimum levels. Real kumbaya setup. Except you forgot that technology doesn't stop advancing just because you agree to stop advancing it. You've been sitting on the same defensive systems for 3 millennia while the universe kept moving forward. The jellyfish counselor dimmed thoughtfully. The human suggests we have grown complacent. I'm not suggesting it. I'm stating it as fact. The Chromath beat you with what amounts to antique tech. What happens when someone shows up with actual modern weapons? Another uncomfortable silence. I was collecting them like trading cards at this point. Finally, Essie spoke. What does humanity want, Jake Reynolds? Why did you intervene? The Squeebs asked for help. Politely. That's literally it. You risked your life, your ship, potential war with an empire, because they asked politely? Is that weird? That feels like it shouldn't be weird. The bug counselor clicked rapidly, which their translator rendered as laughter. Most species require treaties, resource agreements, strategic advantage calculations before rendering aid. That sounds exhausting and boring. Essie's glow flickered through several colors. The council must discuss this matter further. However, we cannot ignore that you did resolve a situation we had failed to address. The Squeeb Collective remains intact because of your actions. So we're good? We're acknowledging reality. However, the Council formally requests that Earth register its military capabilities with the Defense Registry. Sure, I'll pass that along. Fair warning, though. We're gonna tell you the truth and you're probably not gonna like it. Why? I grinned. Because humans are really, really good at the whole violence thing. We spent most of our history perfecting it. You guys spent 3,000 years trying to forget how. That's gonna make for some awkward comparisons. A mammalian counselor, all fur and worry, leaned forward. Should we be concerned about human expansion? Nah, we're friendly. Just don't mess with people we like. I gestured at Pip and Fuzzworth. And we like the Squeebs. This is highly irregular, Essie said. But she didn't sound angry anymore, just tired. Yeah, well, get used to irregular. Humanity just joined the galactic community, and we didn't read the manual. The hearing wrapped up about an hour later, mostly with various counselors arguing about protocols and regulations. I tuned most of it out. The important part was clear. Nobody was going to give the Squeebs trouble anymore, and Earth was officially on the galactic radar. As the connection closed, Pip looked up at me with those huge eyes. Did we just change galactic politics forever? Maybe. Or maybe everyone will forget about it in a year. Either way, you guys are safe. Because you helped us. Because you asked nicely. I corrected. But that still matters, Pip. Even out here. 3 weeks later, I was back on Squeeb Prime for what Pip called a small ceremony of gratitude. Turns out, Squeebs don't do small anything. The entire planetary capital had turned out, which looked like someone had organized a parade for teddy bears. Thousands of them lined the streets, waving tiny flags and holding up signs that said things like, "Thank you, human Jake," and "We love our protector," in letters bigger than the Squeebs holding them. This is ridiculous, I muttered, trying not to step on anyone as I walked toward the Parliament building. This is necessary, Pip said, bouncing alongside me with Fuzzworth. You saved our entire species. The least we can do is throw you a party. I disabled some ships. That's like a Tuesday for most militaries. Not our Tuesday, Fuzzworth said. Our Tuesday involved accepting extinction as inevitable and filing the paperwork to document it. Fair point. The ceremony itself was actually pretty touching. Once I got past the absurdity of receiving medals from creatures I could hold in one hand. They made me an honorary citizen of Squeeb Prime, which came with a crown that was clearly designed for their proportions. It sat on my head like a bottle cap. Speech, the crowd chanted. Speech, speech, speech. I looked down at the sea of fluffy faces, all staring up at me with hope and gratitude. Ah, hell. Okay, look, I said, my voice booming over their tiny Parliament speakers. I'm not good at speeches. I'm a cargo hauler who answered a distress call because I was bored and slightly drunk. That's not hero material, that's just Tuesday. The crowd laughed, which sounded like wind chimes giggling. But here's what I learned from you guys. The galaxy's a big place, full of species that have been around way longer than humanity. You've got technology we're still figuring out. Civilizations that were building cities when we were banging rocks together. But somewhere along the way, a lot of you forgot something important. I knelt down, getting closer to their level. You forgot that being civilized doesn't mean being helpless. That wanting peace doesn't mean accepting bullies. And that asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. The Squeebs knew they couldn't win, so they asked. Everyone said no except the species that barely knows what it's doing out here. Pip's eyes were getting misty, so were a lot of others. So yeah, I helped. Not because I'm special, but because you asked nicely, and that actually matters. Where I come from, when someone asks for help and you can give it, you do. That's not heroism, that's just not being a jerk. The crowd erupted in cheers that sounded like a pet store having a going-out-of-business sale. After the ceremony, Pip and Fuzzworth led me to a warehouse near the spaceport. It was stacked floor to ceiling with containers, each one marked with Earth standard shipping codes. What's all this? Your payment, Pip said proudly. You said you didn't want money or territory or strategic alliances, but you mentioned you liked our coffee. I stared at the containers. There had to be 50 tons of the stuff. Pip, this is way too much. It's not enough, Fuzzworth said firmly. You saved our world. Our children will grow up because you showed up when nobody else would. Coffee seems like the minimum. I felt something weird happening in my chest. Might have been emotions. Might have been the 17 cups of squeeb coffee I'd had that morning. You guys are gonna make me cry, and that's really embarrassing for a cargo hauler. Humans cry when happy? Pip asked. Sometimes. We're weird like that. They helped me load the containers into the nickel, which took about 3 hours because squeeb loading equipment was designed for much smaller cargo. As I was running the pre-flight checks, my comm array pinged with an incoming message, another distress call. I pulled it up. This time it was from a species called the Trill, aquatic guys in the Kepler sector. Some mining corporation was dumping toxic waste in their oceans, and the council had told them it was a legitimate business dispute that would take years to resolve through proper channels. I looked at the message, then at Pip and Fuzzworth standing on the landing pad, tiny paws waving goodbye. Hey Pip, I called out through the external speakers. Quick question. If someone asks nicely for help with a problem, and I happen to have some mining lasers that could solve that problem, that's still just civilian equipment usage, right? Pip's face split into a massive grin. Absolutely. Just helping out. Very legal. Very cool. That's what I thought. I plotted a course for the Kepler sector, watching Squeeb Prime shrink in my viewport. Somewhere behind me, I had 50 tons of the galaxy's best abidiae, coffee. Ahead of me, another species that needed someone to show up when nobody else would. Earth had been asking for decades what humanity's role in the galaxy would be. What would we contribute? What would define us among species that had been spacefaring for millennia? Turns out, our role was pretty simple. We'd be the ones who showed up. Not because we were the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced, but because when someone asked nicely and pointed at their problem, we'd look at it and say, yeah, I can help with that. The galaxy had spent 3,000 years trying to evolve past violence, building systems and protocols and councils to manage every dispute. They'd created a civilization so peaceful it couldn't defend itself, so orderly it couldn't adapt, so diplomatic it let bullies run wild as long as they didn't disrupt the paperwork. And then humanity showed up with mining equipment, a cargo ship held together with spite and duct tape, and an apparently radical philosophy. Help people who ask nicely. My comm board pinged again, and again. More distress calls, species I'd never heard of, problems I didn't understand yet. The news was spreading. There was a human out here who actually answered these things. I grinned, cracked open a container of squeeb coffee, and started making a list. Okay, universe, I said to nobody in particular. Who's next? Line forms on the left. Have your problems ready. And for the love of everything holy, ask nicely. The rusty nickel jumped to FTL, and somewhere in the Kepler sector, a mining corporation was about to have a really bad day. Turns out, all you gotta do is ask nicely and point at your problem. Humans will handle the rest.